Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the OPT Network. You know how we love sharing stories, and we believe that every story gives life to the next story and adds to that word that I absolutely am so in love with, and that is possibility. Our guest this morning is not only an attorney who has been practicing at Neblett, Beard and Arsenault for well over 2 decades, but he is also a servant in this community, and he has made it his business to be the change that he wants to see by giving back in so many areas in our community. We welcome him back to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is attorney Wes Gralapp. Wes, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Carlette.
It's always good to have you, but you know, I was always interested in your story and how you got started. Many people don't know that you're from Reserve, Louisiana, and if you're not familiar with that part of the state, it's a very small town, and it was probably even smaller growing up, where education may not have been on the front lines of things to do. Talk about growing up and coming from such a humble background.
Very humbling to look back and see where we came from. The nice thing about Reserve is that you didn't have to be concerned about driving a car with no brakes. It only had one red light. So we didn't worry about that. But my father was a boat captain, and we lived right off the Mississippi River. And as we were growing up, we found that the culture in South Louisiana was very unique, and we learned to work together as family and with friends so that everybody got to eat and everybody got to prosper. And so, but as a child, I learned that not everybody got to be represented.
Wow. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about your dad. And being a boat captain, he worked hard. Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And so what did he start to tell you about work and education? Or was it more about work and less about education?
What he told me is that doing what he did will only put you in the grave soon.
Wow.
And that it took away from your family life. It took away from everything that he enjoyed doing before he had to go to work.
Wow. Before he had to go to work.
That's right. But hard work was instilled in me, not only by him, but just the community that I was raised in.
When he said that to you, Wes, did you take heart to that when he said, it's only going to put you in the grave early?
I did. And in fact, he was right. He died as a young man at the age of 60.
Wow.
But I started working when I was 12. And I've been working ever since. But
was it expected? Or was it just you saw your dad work and you knew that boys, i.e. men, had to work?
It was necessary, but I've always enjoyed working. I don't know why people wouldn't. It makes you productive, and to me, that makes me happy. So
at 12 years old, what did you start doing? What was your first job?
I was painting tin roofs.
Painting tin roofs.
You know how they'll start to rust?
Yeah.
So there was this silver paint that supposedly you put on aluminum, and that's what I did. And hook up a long ladder, hooked on the eave of the roof, or the peak rather, and paint my way down, move the ladder, paint my way down. That's right. And then from there I went to a snowball stand, and from there I went to a convenience store, then to a hardware store. So
this is really hard work. I mean, painting, and I'm thinking in the heat and learning how to work hard very early on in your life. And so at what point do you think what your dad has told you and what you have seen him go to work and work extremely hard and probably for not a whole lot of money, at what point do you decide, I got to do something different?
It was always told to me by my parents and family that I needed to go to school and change the environment that we live in.
Mm-hmm. And that makes you sad, it seems, just to talk about that. Why?
It doesn't make me sad. It just makes me feel fortunate. They could have chosen anyone.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, I was supported by my parents, my siblings, and
because you were the first one in the family to go to college.
That's right.
So this is a big deal from Reserve, Louisiana, and you're going to LSU. And so how scary is that for you as a 17-year-old?
Actually, ignorance is bliss. That is true, because I walked into LSU and it was probably 20 times larger than Reserve. I had no idea what I was doing, but because I was young and enthusiastic, I was able to learn the college ways and continue to work while I was in school, and really never figured out what a big world it was, because LSU is an environment where you are protected, at least then, and so I just blended in with the other 30,000 people who were students there.
Wow. When you were leaving that day, leading up to your leaving, going to college, what do your folks say to you? Because they're not college educated, and this is really new for the entire family. What do they say to you? Do you remember?
I remember it was rather odd, but they said, be sure you put water in the radiator so that
the truck doesn't burn up.
Yeah, so that the car doesn't overheat on the way. You got a 45-minute drive here, So, and that was what I remember, And everything that I owned, I put in the back of a 1966 Ford and drove on up to LSU, and that was it. I was on my own.
Wow. When you got there, Wes, did you have concerns about whether you would be able to thrive and finish and get a degree?
I was always confident that I would do what I set out to do. Mm-hmm. What threw me was, at that point in time, I figured out that I was different.
How so?
I figured out that I was poor. I figured out that I didn't have the advantages that a lot of the other students had, where they had come from families who had education. Mm-hmm. I figured out that in order for me to grow, I had to get an education, and I had to work hard. But the most important thing was to not forget where I came from, and to always keep in mind how those people helped me.
Mm-hmm. And was it like the village? Were they behind you going to LSU, the town?
In a sense, I had a lot of older people who were pulling for me, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my close friends always thought that I'd end up being an attorney.
Did they?
And so I really didn't have a choice.
You had to make it.
I wasn't going to disappoint.
Wasn't going to quit.
No way.
Hey, everybody, we're going to get a break here, but when we come back, we're going to talk about why it's so important not to just start, but finish. And on the journey, when you have success, what do you do with it? Wes Gralapp is our guest this morning. He's on point, talking about the story behind the story. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. I love sharing others' stories because I know that there are so many people who look at leaders and people who are successful in our community and wonder how they got there, or sometimes you just think they were always successful, and not so. Our guest this morning is attorney Wes Gralapp from the firm of Neblett, Beard, and Arsenault. We're talking about how he started on the path to becoming a lawyer. And before we went to break, we were talking about, home and leaving Reserve, Louisiana, going to Baton Rouge, which at that time was a big city and really still is as it's grown, but 30,000 students there, and then you start to work your way through college. What are your folks saying as you leave, the first person in your family, and then you get there and it looks like you're having success? What are they thinking? What are they saying to you at that point? After that first year, that you make it through?
They're just, whatever you need, whatever we can do. Mm-hmm. So.
And is that hard because when you say that, if there's so much emotion, because you maybe know that they didn't have it at the time?
Well, I knew that they couldn't do it. My parents were very intelligent, but for whatever reason, they didn't have the same opportunities afforded to them that I got lucky and fell upon for me. Mm-hmm. And so they always instilled in me that getting an education is very important. Reading, mm-hmm. that was one of the biggest things as a young person, as an elementary school person. Mm-hmm. We made sure that, having a library card was something that was a big deal to me. Uh-huh. And, but getting to the library was also, a big deal. And being able to afford to buy books when the bookmobile came to the school,
I remember the bookmobile.
Yeah, uh-huh. Very exciting. The background that I have inspired me to become who I am. And my parents were very influential in helping me get there. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with borrowing money to go to school. Absolutely not. Most of us had to. That's right. And there's nothing wrong with being first. If it wouldn't be for my parents instilling in me and making the sacrifices so that I didn't have to work as hard as my father did and as hard as my mother did to put food on the table. But for that, I would not be an attorney today. Mm-hmm. I would be something else, but I would still be successful. Mm-hmm. Because success is measured by what you get out of life and what you put into life. Mm-hmm. And if you're not trying to better yourself by helping others and by being committed to a standard of caring for society, then you're not going to be successful. Mm-hmm. And so while I ended up being a lawyer, and that has a reputation as being successful, it's not the lawyer in me that makes me successful. What makes you successful? It's the commitment to helping people, to making certain that every day you do the right thing and that you respect others, that you know that anything can be taken from you in a moment, and so you cherish it. Mm-hmm. And that you just commit yourself to being a good person. Mm-hmm. And so after you finish undergraduate, you go on and you go to law school, which was something that was in your heart to do. And then you get out and you're recruited right away by Neblett, Beard, and Arsenault. That's right. And so what goes into the decision of this firm? Well, this firm had an excellent background of serving the public, and particularly representing people who had been injured offshore or on our many waterways. And I always wanted to be connected to the water in some way. Mm-hmm. And so it gave me an opportunity to start my career in the maritime personal injury business and helping people who have been injured and who were less fortunate. And so... Did you immediately think of your family and your town? Because
you were a product of the waterways.
Absolutely. And the old saying that you can take the boy out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the boy. Uh-huh. Well, reserve is not country like we are used to or accustomed to here in central Louisiana, but because the culture is so different. But you can't take the reserve out of me. Mm-hmm. I've tried. I can wash it off my skin, but I can't get it out of my heart. Uh-huh. So I grew up wanting to be on the water, and this is as close as I can get. Uh-huh. So
there was an accident, though, that happened that when you were growing up that really sort of, I guess, was indelibly implanted in your heart. That accident of that ferry. Talk about how that affected your thoughts as a child, and then you become a man and understand that loss.
It was an incredible experience. I was probably 9 or 10 years old when the ferry capsized, carrying about 70 or 80 people across the river to work, and all of them drowned. And just seeing the family members of the people who lost their loved ones on the levee, waiting for that body to come back, and seeing how it changed their lives. I went to school with several people whose fathers were killed in this accident. Wow. And they were never the same. And their losses were both emotional and in the leadership role, but financially as well. And when you don't have much as a community, and everybody pulls together to make sure that everyone eats and that everyone enjoys themselves, then you when that changes for mm-hmm. so many folks at one time, it inspired me to want to be in a position to help families like that. Mm-hmm. And so setting out, going to law school, I always knew that I wanted to help people who were less fortunate, who had accidents come upon them that changed their lives, and try to make their lives as normal as possible, knowing that we can never replace what they once had. Hmm.
And do you think sometimes when you come from small town America and you don't, the population is less educated, that sometimes those people don't end up getting the compensation that maybe they should have for such a catastrophic accident?
It happens all the time. People are ignorant of what the law allows them when they've been injured or when they've lost a loved one, and they need someone on their side. They need someone who does know the ins and outs of what they deserve and how they can get it. And so many folks were devastated by this ferry accident, and there are other unfortunate accidents along the way that you just see where if they'd have just had somebody helping them, their life would be better. It wouldn't be back to normal. You can't put people back in the place they were before a tragedy, but you can help them through it. And helping people through tragedies and repairing their lives to the extent that we can is just something that I think I was born to do.
Wow. Hey, everybody, we got to get a break here. Attorney Wes Gralapp from Neblett, Beard, and Arsenault. He's been practicing for well over 2 decades. Is our guest this morning. Stay with us. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is attorney Wes Gralapp from Neblett, Beard, and Arsenault. And we see the big firms, but oftentimes you don't see the people that are in the firm and that make up the firm and what their hearts are and why they do the things that they do. And so before we went to break, we were talking about that terrible accident that I guess it probably, did it stay with you forever? That capsizing of that ferry?
Still to this day.
To this day.
You know, people talk about hearing someone cry or express emotion, and they refer to it as a wail. Mm-hmm. I can still hear it. The families, the wives.
Wailing.
Yeah. You know, as their husbands' bodies were identified. And you have to understand, this is one by one on the riverside of the levee. People are in a long line, and as the whole community is there, and as the bodies are brought out and the bag unzipped and the name called forward.
My God.
And
how does that change that town?
Significantly.
That's a huge. It's only a few thousand people in the town.
We became closer. We became more understanding, more sympathetic. We bonded together. Most everyone in that area is Catholic, and the church is on the river road, and so the funerals and the processions were a constant for a couple of weeks. There were funerals that going on daily, all day.
Wow.
And so while that was sad and tragic, and remains so for all of those people, the bonding that the community did and the coming together to help one another gave me a sense of understanding what communities are.
And then so once you start to have success in your career, is it just embedded in you to try to give back and help others?
I think so. I often question, where does one's motivation come from to serve the public? And I think to a certain extent that you're born with it, and not just with the desire to do it, but with the innate ability to do it. And I feel like it's my calling, that's what I was put here to do.
To serve.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things that you've done and over the years and continue to do are look for causes that you can support. Talk about some of those causes. You have really served veterans and made that something that's important to you. Talk a little bit about that.
My grandparents were World War II veterans, and their wives, my grandmothers, worked here stateside while they fought overseas. And I grew up in a culture where protecting this country and serving this country is one of the best things you can do. And so we didn't have a war to fight when I was young. I often thought about whether or not military service would have been for me. But the romance and the desire had changed, but the history was still there. And so what these people do for us, we don't know as civilians. We don't understand what they go through. And so what we do at Neblett, Beard, and Arsenault is try to give back. And in a small way, we help bring them together, a small group here in central Louisiana. We try to support their efforts to have camaraderie, to send care packages, if you will, to those who are overseas fighting our wars, protecting our country, protecting that of others. And until you really understand that a large part of what we have in our country, insofar as democracy, a large part of what we have done is protect the democracy and instill our democracy and our thoughts and values in other countries. And to know that we have men and women who travel, leave their families, risk their lives to protect the rights of others, well, then what I do here is just not comparable. Mm-hmm. And so if we can at any time help someone who protects our country and serves the world, well, that's our obligation.
Right. It's a no-brainer.
Easy decision.
And so at what point do you know that Richard has the same heart, that you and he have the same heart for serving your community? I mean, because you have the success, you have what people deem as success. You know, you have those things. When do y'all know that, you know, you're both, because he's very much one of those people on the front lines of giving back and understanding humble beginnings. When do you know that?
I think from the moment we met, we had a understanding of what our backgrounds were. Mm-hmm. He came from New York, but his father worked in construction, mm-hmm. and his first language was French, and they were from Canada. And so Richard has worked hard all of his life and has worked hand in hand with people who are construction workers, people who are farmers, people who are handicapped, people mm-hmm. who just need a little help from time to time. And they need help from people who are professionals. Mm-hmm. They not only need lawyers, but they need accountants, they need engineers and mm-hmm. things like that. So do y'all sit down and have the conversation? Because both of you come from, you know, humble beginnings and grew up poor, and you say, you know what, we are, with the success that we have, we're going to find ways to give back. We've talked about it, but more so it's a connection. It's just something that you feel. Mm-hmm. And so when we start to generate an idea about how we can help the community, then our energy level just rises. And so we get enthusiastic about it, and we put our efforts forward so that in some way we make a small difference in somebody's life. Wow.
And so with all of that, you also find ways to give back to the seniors, to the food bank. Talk about how you got connected with that mission.
Well, my mother was the director of Council on Aging in St. John Parish for almost 20 years. This was after I had moved out and went away to school. But I never realized until she had that job how many of our seniors didn't know where their next meal was coming from. And it wasn't so much so that they could not afford it. A lot of them can't, but some of them physically cannot cook, mm-hmm. cannot clean, and they live alone, they live independently. And so I know that when we do food bank drives and we look to raise money for those types of things, that it not only directly goes to the seniors, but it also supports programs like Meals on Wheels. Mm-hmm. And, you know, senior citizen Council on Aging facilities that have lunches prepared mm-hmm. every day, mm-hmm. you know. And it also gives them society and culture where they can come together. And for us, people our age, they are the greatest generation.
Absolutely.
They are the people who develop the core fabric of our lives and who have fought their way through all of the many issues that we've had. Mm-hmm. And we still have issues as a country.
Indeed.
But they're not near as bad as they were. Mm-hmm. And it took leadership, it took effort, it took sacrifice, and it took understanding for the United States to begin to heal age-old problems. And I think it was the elderly of today who started to change all of those things.
Sure.
And in order for them to do so, they had to change themselves.
Hmm. And so now that you're all grown up and you have had a lot of success and continue to have success, what does your mom say about you? that she's been able to live to see it. What does she say about you? How big is that for her?
It's huge. Excuse me. She took care of me.
And now you can take care of her.
I try.
Indeed. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for sharing your heart and sharing with our listeners and viewers how you are being the change that you want to see every single day.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed. And to your lovely bride, Kim, behind every good man, there's a strong woman, and we don't want to leave Miss Kim out, Miss Kim Gralapp. Our guest this morning has been attorney Wes Gralapp from Neblett, Beard, and Arsenault. Y'all, we got to get a break here, but we're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. I'm Carlette Christmas.
And I'm Glenda Stock, and this is our final point today on Point.
Glenda, Neblett, Beard, and Arsenault has been serving this community for almost 40 years.
Lifetimes.
A lifetime, literally.
Yes.
And attorney Wes Gralapp has been with the firm well over 2 decades.
Unbelievable.
What about his heart, humility, and compassion?
I tell you, we interview people all the time. And certainly get a chance to get a feel of the individual up close and personal. But I want to tell you people, today we have seen, I think, one of the most humble and transparent interviews that we've conducted.
Absolutely.
And I think it is just a giant statement about the person. This gentleman obviously came from roots that are very deep and continue to be very deep, with the greatest humility that I've seen in a long, long time.
And when you have success, sometimes it's hard to maintain that.
This is truly a walking definition of remembering from whence you cometh.
That's right.
And I think that is probably, and he well knows it, has attributed and allowed him the success in his life. He truly, from day one, as a 9-year-old, began to ponder things in his heart and in his world that happened to him, tragic, but yet they were forming his world and forming his future, along with his family and the influence of his family and friends. So this gentleman is a prized possession, in our community, to be able to articulate to us. And we just forget sometimes that these people who we deem to be in lofty places began at the lowest of lows.
Right.
And worked their way through and up into the levels of success that they now enjoy. No wonder their firm, his leadership, Richard Arsenault's leadership, is paramount in this community, because they are made of very similar fabric.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you can tell a lot about a man the way he treats his mother.
Yes.
The way he loves his mother.
And his wife.
I wasn't going to leave his... that really tells you a lot about the man.
I agree.
And one of the things that we are really glad to do, Glenda, on a daily basis is to share those stories. Oftentimes we see people, as you said, in those lofty places, and we don't realize that they come from humble beginnings.
Right.
And his life could have gone a totally different direction were it not for his family and his mother. He said to me, my mother was the one that said, you can do it. And what does it mean to any of us when we have that support? Right. Being the first generation in his family to go to LSU. And that was like the big city from Reserve.
And what a career, really, that God placed him in.
Right.
To allow him to use his servant heart, which I believe he truly depicts that in every way. His vulnerability, his trust factor, his honesty, his forthrightness, his transparency. Those to me are things that you know, if I sit across the table from an attorney, those are things I'm going to be looking for.
And you have sat across the table.
From a few. Yes. Fortunately, not him, considering his realm of law. But I do just really have this morning, I don't know, there's just really this refreshing joy to see a gentleman in his stature allow this community to see him as an open book.
Yeah.
You know, that takes an awful lot of confidence, strength, and wisdom,
Absolutely.
in my opinion,
Absolutely.
to do that. Who among us can make ourselves so vulnerable and do so with such great humility? What a compelling story.
It is a compelling story, and for those people, sadly, we don't want anybody to have to need an attorney, but when you do want one, you know, you want to know something about them.
Right.
And you want to know that they're just folk.
You know, this is what our third interview of attorneys at this particular firm with Richard and
Barbara.
Along
we've
today
had a
with
couple.
Wes. And I will tell you, without fail, all of them demonstrate to me the highest of character. And they all came from very real places that you and I and our listeners can identify with.
Absolutely.
These are real people doing real work for real people.
Absolutely. And more than that, when you have a firm that has the stature of Neblett, Beard, and Arsenault, a lot of times people will be in a community and not figure out ways to give back. When I tell you that they're on the front lines for looking for causes to give back to and be a part of and pour back into the community what the community has been able to give them, that says a lot to me about any company.
That NBA logo shows up in many, many places, and for all of the right reasons, which we heard him articulate today, their devotion to veterans as well as senior citizens. Just, again, two amazing causes, but those are just two of many that they find themselves supporting. We are a lucky community to have such a prestigious law firm, first of all, but one with such heart,
Absolutely, absolutely. And they don't just serve Central Louisiana, they are serving around the country and serving in some of the most influential and life-changing cases. And we have the opportunity to have them right here in our own backyard. And sometimes we forget to honor those people who are among us. You know, sometimes they become common to us.
Sure.
And it could be that we just don't know or we don't have enough information, but that's why we love to share the stories, the backstories of people, of how they got to where they are and what they are doing to be the change that they want to see.
And I assure you that if you find yourself in the unfortunate situation to have had something occur that you know went wrong, you will do the right thing by picking up the phone and calling NBA today. Those gentlemen and those ladies who do business there and who render their services there, they are there for all the right reasons to help you help yourself in situations that you desperately need it.
Absolutely. There you go. Our guest this morning has been attorney Wes Gralapp from Neblett, Beard, and Arsenault. We got to get a break here, but we'll be back with more. I'm Carlette Christmas.
And I'm Glenda Stock, and this has been our final point today on Point.
Stay with us, everybody. Back in a moment.